We want to take you to the White House where President Trump is taking questions from reporters.
Office and find out that the answer is obsolete. It's like his business. It's obsolete. You come up with a new chip and it's obsolete about 2 minutes later, right? But that's what's good about his business. That's why he's the only one that's successful in it. But
just to follow up on my colleague's question, from Russia saying that your foreign policy is largely in line with their vision. Should that be concerning to Americans?
said what?
Should that be concerning to Americans?
Read the statement.
That Russia says that your administration's foreign policy is, quote, largely in line with their vision.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think it takes two to tango, and you're going to have to make a deal with Russia, and you're going to have to make a deal with Ukraine. You're going to have the assent, and you're going to have the consent from the European nations, because I think that's important, and from us. I think everybody has to get into a room, so to speak, and we have to make a deal. And the deal can be made very fast. It should not be that hard a deal to make. It can be made very fast. Now, maybe somebody doesn't want to make a deal. And if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long. That person will not be listened to very long because I believe that Russia wants to make a deal. I believe certainly the people of Ukraine want to make a deal. They've suffered more than anybody else. We talk about suffering. They've suffered. But if you think about it, under President Bush, they got Georgia, right? Russia got Georgia. Under President Obama, they got a nice big submarine base, a nice big chunk of land where they have their submarines. You know that, right? Crimea. Under President Trump, they got nothing. And under President Biden, they tried to get the whole thing. They tried to get the whole big Ukraine, the whole thing. If I didn't get in here, they would have gotten the whole thing. So I can only say you can go back to Bush, you can go back to Obama, and go back to Biden. They took a lot. The only one they didn't get, you know what I gave them? I gave them anti-tank missiles. That's what I gave them. I gave them sanctions on Russia. I gave them javelins. You know the javelins? You know when they took out all those tanks? You know the tanks were heading to Kiev by the hundreds, and they were unstoppable. And I gave them javelins. So, you know, I really, Putin is the one that will tell you this has not been so good for them. The fact is that I just want fairness. I want fairness. But think of it. I gave Russia nothing except grief. I gave them nothing. I gave them sanctions and javelins. That's what I gave them. Obama gave them sheets, and you heard that statement before. It's a very famous. Trump gave them javelins, and Obama gave them sheets, and then they say how close I am to Russia. And let me tell you, we have to make a deal because there are a lot of people being killed that shouldn't be killed. But remember, Trump gave them nothing, and the other presidents gave them a lot. They gave them everything.
Mr. President, on trade, you met with Argentine President Javier Milei at CPAC. He wants to sign a free trade agreement with the United States. Is that something that you would consider even with Argentina?
I'll consider anything. And Argentina, I think he's great, by the way. I think he's a great leader. He's doing a great job. He's doing a fantastic job. Brought it back from oblivion. Yeah, we'll look at things. We're looking at the UK with things. It doesn't have to be tariffs, but tariffs are easy. They're fast. They're efficient. And they bring fairness. For instance, when people kill their dollar, their equivalent of the dollar, whether it's the yuan or the yen in Japan or the yuan in China, when they drop them down, that puts us at a very unfair disadvantage. So all I have to do is say, Howard, we're going to have to raise the tariffs a little bit because I've called President Xi, I've called the leaders of Japan to say you can't continue to reduce and break down your currency. You can't do it because it's unfair to us. It's very hard for us to make tractors, Caterpillar, here when Japan, China, and other places are killing their currency, meaning driving it down. So all of these things add up. And the way you solve it very easily is with tariffs, because when they do that, instead of having to make phone calls every day like I used to do with certain leaders, President Xi a little bit, a lot of phone calls, talking about the fact that they're lowering their yuan, they're lowering it down, and that makes it very, very hard for us. So this way I just say, look, let them do that, and we make up for it with the tariffs. But
will you be speaking with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum about
yeah, sure, I will. I have a lot of respect for her.
Mr. President, tariff takes
Yeah.
effect. It'll be 20% on China now. How high are you willing to go against China?
Well, I can't say. It depends on what they do with their currency. It depends on what they do in terms of a retaliation with some kind of an economic retaliation, which I don't think they're going to retaliate too much. Hey, look, the United States has been taken advantage of for 40 years. The United States has been a laughingstock for years and years. That's why this gentleman is built in Taiwan instead of building here. It would have been better if he built here. If we had a president that knew what they were doing, and we had a lot of them very bad on trade. Look, I'm a huge fan of Ronald Reagan, but he was bad on trade, very bad on trade. He allowed a lot of people, a lot of businesses to be taken. So I say that with due respect because he was so great on other things, but he was bad on trade. We are setting records right now, records like nobody has ever seen before. When you have companies like this coming in and almost 40% of their company in one signature is going to be devoted to what he does, which is one of the most important businesses in the world. That's an unbelievable thing. When Apple now is going to start building all of their plants here, all because of what we've done in terms of, it's not because he likes me or they like me. They don't probably like me at all. I don't know. I think he likes me a little bit at least. But you know what? It's the incentive we created or the negative incentive. I mean, it's going to be very costly for people to take advantage of this country. They can't come in and steal our money and steal our jobs and take our factories and take our businesses and expect not to be punished. And they're being punished by tariffs. It's a very powerful weapon that politicians haven't used because they were either dishonest, stupid, or paid off in some other form. And now we're using them. Say it.
Have you spoken with President Xi about this?
I don't want to tell you that. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Running for New York City mayor.
Will people who don't respond to the emails be fired?
All right, we have been listening to President Trump speak from the White House. This event began as an announcement by a company based in Taiwan. The announcement that the company is investing $100 billion in U.S. semiconductor chip manufacturing operations. The president then took questions and discussed the role of tariffs, as well as the continued strained relationship with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. President Trump today was asked about the Kremlin and reports saying that their foreign policy is aligned with saying our foreign policy vision or that of President Trump is aligned with their vision. Should that be concerning to Americans? That was a question put to President Trump, and the president said it takes two to tango. You have to make a deal with Russia. You have to make a deal with Ukraine. He wanted consent from European nations as well as from us. And he said everyone has to get into a room and make a deal. It should not be that hard a deal to make. Maybe someone doesn't want to make a deal and that person won't be around very long, won't be listened to very long. The president was also asked about tariffs, saying that tariffs are easy, fast, efficient, and bring fairness, of course, in response to tariffs against Canada and Mexico and increased tariffs against China going into effect around midnight. And he said that they are a very powerful weapon that leaders right now haven't used. Then the president ended the press conference or ended the question and answer portion. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this announcement from the Taiwanese company before we bring in Olivia Rinaldi, one of our CBS News White House reporters. So this company, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC, is one of the world's 3 largest manufacturers of semiconductor chips. The $100 billion investment in manufacturing plants in the U.S. will be over the next 4 years. This could help the company avoid tariffs on semiconductor chip imports. And we also know semiconductor chips are very critical components for today's technology. Let's dive into this, tariffs and all things Ukraine with CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. So, Olivia, I brought up what the president said about making a deal, saying maybe someone doesn't want to make a deal and that person won't be around very long. Was it your understanding that he was coyly talking about Ukrainian President Zelensky?
Yeah, Lindsay, that's kind of the line he was towing there, going right up to almost saying it's time for regime change in Ukraine. We have not heard that yet from anyone. We have heard conversations from Republicans that they're not quite sure if a deal can be made to bring peace in Ukraine if Zelensky is the leader, but we have not heard that yet of there needs to be regime change. So Trump coyly towing that line there, talking about Zelensky. A very notable press conference, though, as we are seeing these deepening divisions between these two leaders. Of course, we know there was that explosive Oval Office meeting last week between Ukrainian President Zelensky and Trump and his Vice President Vance. And of course, Zelensky went over to Europe over the weekend to really get security assurances there. But this is all coming, as Zelensky says, there's still hope for that rare earth minerals deal, even though the White House seems like there isn't at this point. We heard from Scott Bessent over the weekend talking to our Margaret Brennan, essentially saying that they are looking for peace on the ground in Ukraine first before that economic deal. That's a notable shift because we had been hearing that they wanted to have an economic deal signed to really guarantee some security assurances for Ukraine and strengthen relations with the U.S. Think of it this way. If there are U.S. troops or U.S. personnel on the ground working on a rare earths minerals deal or working on mining there, it's much less likely that President Putin of Russia is going to either invade or take military action in Ukraine in those certain areas, essentially guaranteeing them that security. But that deal fell through after what we saw last weekend. And here you hear Trump potentially talking about a change in regime change and who's leading Ukraine for them to really get this deal across the finish line. He brought up that AP article while also diminishing the Associated Press and our colleagues there. But he brought up that article that said, where we saw, rather, President Zelensky talk about the end to the war being very far off and hoping that that's not the case. We, of course, know through covering Trump on the campaign trail, peace in Ukraine between them and Russia has been top of mind for him. It's something he said he could get done on day one. We're day 42 into this administration. It's proving to be a lot more difficult than perhaps they thought it would be.
Right. Zelensky doesn't want to enter into a peace deal that, as you mentioned in our last hour, doesn't include Ukrainian sovereignty or makes them give up something to Putin that they don't want to give up. Let's talk about tariffs. The president saying they're fast, easy, efficient. They bring fairness, a very powerful weapon that politicians haven't used. What do we know right now about the tariffs that are set to begin and whether the president is having any conversations with world leaders? For example, he said that when it comes to Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, he respects her very much. Whether there are any conversations being had between now and midnight that could stave those off.
Yeah, well, in response to that question, he said, no, there's no room left for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs are all set. They will go into effect tomorrow. We know these are the 25% tariffs that Trump has talked about against Canada and Mexico, seeing that he wants to see more action from them to really stem the flow of fentanyl across the border. Of course, we know just a month ago, these similar conversations were happening, and he had those last-minute talks and deals with Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico, but also Justin Trudeau of Canada. Now, there are elections in Canada this week. There might not be a new prime minister, or there might be a new prime minister for Trump to be talking to. But deals were made about a month ago. They kicked the can 30 days down the road. That is here. Trump says there's no more room for a negotiation. Those are going to go into effect, and then reciprocal tariffs will go into effect. I believe it was April 2nd. A lot of dates being thrown around over the last couple of days about when these tariffs are set to go in and what they will impact. But that spells higher prices for Americans. Reminder, a tariff is a tax on Americans that they have to pay on goods that are imported. So it seems like they're all set to go into effect, even though we heard Howard Lutnick over the weekend talking about perhaps some room for negotiations. Seems like Trump is moving forward with those, and those will be going into effect very shortly.
Olivia, thank you. All right, we are going to have much more news after this, so we're going to stay tuned for a quick break. CBS News 24/7 will be back. Stay with us.